welcome to our first Federal Bank and Trust Lunch and Learn. And as I was explaining a little bit earlier, we talked about doing lunch and learns about right before COVID hit. And then COVID hit and we put the kibosh on that. And so now we're really excited to be able to open our space, to be able to provide some knowledge and information that will help you as you go out in your own businesses. I'm Kim Wells, I'm from the Cash Management Department. Daniel Bennett is also part of the Cash Management team back here. And then we have Tyler Niermeyer, right? Said it right, that's a mouthful. Our IT director, and also present is Kevin Bailey, our bank president. So welcome everybody, welcome Billings. Thank you for taking time out of your day, and we'll let Tyler get started with the presentation.
Great. Well, as Kim said, welcome. My intent here is for you guys to leave with full bellies and full minds, full of information that you can use to protect yourselves, protect your organizations. In preparing these slides, I went through it this morning and it took about 30 minutes. Kim's added a little bit, but the last time I did a presentation that I had done for 30 minutes, there was so much conversation around it that we actually went for an hour and a half. So I'm glad we scheduled it for this long, and I'm hoping that we'll have some of that conversation as well. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I tend to get just start going. So please feel free if you've got questions or concerns or thoughts that you want to interject. Please don't hesitate to let me know. Speak up. This is designed not only to be, me sharing information, but you guys sharing information amongst yourselves, because that's really the best way for us all to get better. So to start out, I thought that we would just go through and just talk about the state of cybersecurity today. Some current trends and things like that. Then we talk about a specific threat, which is business email compromise. If you don't know what that means, I'll explain it here in a little bit. And then ransomware, which I think everybody's familiar with. You hear about it all the time, about businesses having their critical data get encrypted, and then they have to pay a huge amount of money to get it back, or their businesses are down for a while, or those sorts of things. So that's kind of my plan. We'll start by just talking about some of the current statistics. Now these are current, it's 2020 data, mostly because the 2021 data isn't finished being investigated yet. This is from the IC3, which is a division of the FBI. It's the Internet Crimes Complaint Center. That's what the C3 is. They field information just from the United States on cyber crimes that have occurred. Over time, you'll see that it has an upward trend, with the exception of the amount of money. Between 2016 and 2017, it dipped slightly, but then it more than made up for it the following year, going from $1.4 billion in losses to $2.7 billion in losses in 2018. The number of complaints, just like the amount in losses, has also gone up. So that's the trend that we're looking at. You look at world politics, you look at the things that are happening now. I have no belief that it's going to not continue to do this. Just prior to the invasion of the Ukraine, Russia launched a cyber attack against Ukrainian infrastructure to decapacitate some of their different elements. As the United States and the rest of the West starts to enforce sanctions upon Russia, I would not be surprised to see them use some of those tactics against us. So it's real, it's out there, it's growing. Worldwide though, one thing that I'd also like to mention is that this is a $3 trillion a year business in 2015. Most recent data from 2020 estimates that at $6 trillion a year, which in terms of economies, that would make it the third largest economy in the world, behind the United States and China. Massive, massive industry. So when you talk about why do people do it? Because it's money. Because you can make a lot of money doing it if you're good at it. Some of these folks are state-sponsored. We've already talked about Russia attacking Ukraine. Some are vigilantes. So right after Russia invaded Ukraine, we had the Anonymous group attack Russia and release a bunch of information on their people within their Defense Department. So they are acting in what they believe to be, righteousness and trying to get revenge. And then you've got organized crime, which are the people that are in it for the money, and they may sell their services to a state-sponsored actor, or they may end up just keeping whatever money that they can receive. So, big deal. The United States is taking notice, our government, within the $1.5 trillion budget, I believe, that was passed this past week. There is a stipulation in there where businesses, specifically critical infrastructure, are required to report cyber incidents within 72 hours of discovering them, or of identifying them as that. So this was reported this morning from Bloomberg. Biden signed it yesterday, I believe, into law. Now, if you're not critical infrastructure, this probably doesn't affect you. I know when COVID hit, there was a whole lot of questions about, am I critical infrastructure? Can I go to work? Those early days of COVID. So you probably know whether you're critical infrastructure, and that is a pretty wide net of who's critical infrastructure. So I believe, things like construction are considered critical infrastructure, grocery stores. So like I say, it's a pretty wide net. But if that doesn't catch your attention or doesn't apply to you, insurance is definitely taking notice as well. If you've tried to apply for a cyber insurance policy or any sort of computer related policy, you have probably been given a questionnaire similar to this. This is actually the one that we're given from one of our cyber insurance vendors, and it asks a lot of questions about your business. Do you have a backup system? Do you have a business continuity plan, a disaster recovery plan, an incident response plan? Do you have ways of keeping everything up to date? Do you have multi-factor authentication? And if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about it here in a minute. Do you have training for your employees regarding these procedures? And if you don't answer those questions in the way that they want you to, that might make you uninsurable at worst. At best, it's going to just increase the cost of your insurance. So as a business, if you feel like you need to have cyber insurance, you need to have some of these things in place. And we'll talk about how you might be able to do that and what some of those things are and how they protect you as we move on. To break down on those cyber crime statistics, just kind of by the categories that we're talking about today. As we talked about earlier, in 2020, there were almost 800,000 complaints with losses exceeding $4.2 billion. Business email compromise was about half of those losses. We'll describe that again here in a minute. Ransomware, which is what everybody hears about in the news, was a fraction of the actual losses and a fraction of the incidents. So when we talk about business email compromise, you may have heard it under a bunch of different names. Sometimes it's called CEO fraud, CEO impersonation, man-in-the-email scam, bogus invoice scheme, the employee account compromise. All of these fall under the category of what we're going to call today business email compromise. And really what it amounts to is business email compromise is a con. It starts off as a con. They get you to give up information that allows them to get into your email accounts. And that can happen a number of ways. We'll kind of walk through that. But early on, what they did was they impersonated an account. So that's where we all learned, look at who's sending you stuff in your email. If it looks weird, delete it, right? We're all used to that. Well, the bad guys now are used to that too, and they've upped their game. So now what they're trying to do, as they've advanced, is they want to actually get into that legitimate person's account. So they trick people into giving up their credentials so that they can log in. Or they'll find some other way, and maybe they'll take control of your computer. You click an attachment, and you've given them control of your computer, and they just watch, and when you step away from your computer, they do what they're going to do. So they are upping their game as we're upping ours. So the old rules about, look for the weird emails, look for an L that should be an L, but it's actually a 1, those sorts of things, those still apply, but they're not the gotcha, catch 'em all sort of thing. So the way there are actually 4 different categories of business email compromise. And the way this is divided up is on this side, on the left side, if you're watching billings, are the spoofed email accounts. And by spoofed, we mean an email account that looks like it's somebody else. So that's where you change the L to a 1, or you have a fake email account that's disguised with that friendly name, because typically when I get an email from somebody, it doesn't show their email address, it shows the address that's in my address book. It's Tyler Niereamer, not T. Niereamer at eFirst Federal. So they have a way of masking that actual email address with a friendly name that might look familiar to you. So those would be the spoofed email addresses, or spoofed business email compromises. And for both of those, this is just a matter, the top row is a matter of whether it comes from within your organization or tries to appear like it's within your organization. And the bottom would be where they try to appear like there's somebody outside of your organization, a customer or a vendor, for example. Now on the right-hand side, the even-numbered ones, those are actually accounts that have been compromised by the bad guys. And you see the little pink exclamation point. That's just a matter of sophistication, how hard the bad guys have to work to do it. So super easy to fake that you're somebody else. Gets a little bit harder to actually get into their email accounts. And it gets even harder when you're trying to spoof a supplier, because you have to understand how that business works, what the cadence of buying and selling and those sorts of things are. You have to have more of an intimate knowledge of the business. So that's really the difference between the different types of business email compromise. So how does it work? So we're going to assume that you've got a supplier. And it doesn't really matter who, but let's say it's the person that provides your janitorial products. And they get an email. And somehow, however, their email account gets compromised. Bad guys in the janitorial email account, they watch traffic for the next couple weeks, couple months, so that they can get a good understanding of how business works. They look at what your invoices look, or what the janitorial invoices look like, what the amounts on those look like, who their customers are. They really get a feel for how the business works, and that's where they're silently observing the threats and the victim behavior. Next, they're going to set up some infrastructure. So they're going to set up a fake website that may look like that vendor. They're going to set up a fake email server that might look like that vendor. Then they'll send an email, they'll inject something into the middle of that conversation. So let's say you're in negotiations over the cost of toilet paper or whatever. They will inject themselves into that conversation at a critical point and say, hey, toilet paper prices are going up. We need you to sign a new contract. And there's a link in that email. You click that link, it says, please log in here. You put in your credentials, which more times than not match your email credentials. Now the bad guys, because that infrastructure that they've set up, that fake website, has now captured the email credentials, and now they're into your accounts. And depending on what you do, they may be able to interrupt a wire or promote a ACH payment or something like that. So that's just kind of the general structure of how a business email compromise works and how they cash out at the end. Now this is stuff that we've seen here at the bank. We've seen it happen to our customers. We've seen it attempted against us. And so we want to make sure that everybody is aware of it so that you guys can catch it. The earlier we catch it in the scheme of things, the better it's going to be, and the less likely it is that people are going to have significant losses. So some of the examples that we've seen one of our legitimate vendors' email accounts get compromised. a fake invoice was sent to our accounts payable department. And that invoice, you needed to click the link, just like what I was describing, and they were attempting to get email credentials. It went to an Office 365 account, which that's what we use for our email. That's what a lot of businesses use for email. So it looks like a very familiar and friendly page, but it wasn't. It was the bad guy's account. Other things we've seen is we've seen an employee supposedly requesting that their payroll get redirected to a different bank account. It wasn't actually the employee requesting this, but it went to HR because they knew who HR was from some other sort of information that they were able to glean. Had we not had processes in place internally where we verify that, that employee may be without a paycheck. So that's a significant thing. We've had realtors and title companies attempt to update wiring instructions, and that's just because somebody had gotten into their accounts, again, trying to redivert funds. We've also seen compromised and fake emails from customers, and sometimes potential employees come to us with attachments or links to sites, come download my resume, or those sorts of things, or an attachment with some malicious software on it. So it hits all areas of your business. And so everybody within your business needs to be aware of the types of scams that can hit those. Is that any questions or thoughts on so far? I mean, I'm meaning to scare you in some ways, and some of these are things that you guys have probably seen within your own businesses. I mean, I don't know, I know we've got some realtors here. We've got
I'm a mosquito mercenary.
a mosquito mercenary. So what other sorts of businesses?
I'm in the trucking and I have terrorist insurance, but I don't have that.
The cyber insurance? Or,
No. Yeah,
okay.
they didn't put it in my trucking company. I mean, this is the first time I've had to take terrorist insurance. But they didn't have that to offer, so I'm gonna have to re-up it and see.
It's usually an add-on policy. They won't
Which is
bundle
the
it
terror,
with your
yeah,
with your
this is
standard
the
stuff.
outside,
Yeah.
yeah, binder, and, yeah, we get all kinds of scary stuff.
Well, and with trucking, I mean, you think about the stuff that people are paying you to carry, and you know you could have a vendor or a recipient of something, bad guy in either side of that transaction try and redivert funds.
Well, now we're having, because all of our electronic logs and are linked to the chip in your truck, and they could shut our trucks down now.
Yeah, so that's another spot
So
where a
we're
vendor can
kinda,
get you.
everybody is worried about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Other industries? I'm hearing sounds from Billings. What do we got up there?
We got a question here.
Yeah.
This Kayla, I just had a question if you could maybe go through how you caught the issues or like the scam emails internally. Like what were the red flags that you saw?
Yeah, so I wish I could say that I saw them. I didn't. As far as the red flags, it was our staff. Staff saw something that just looked off. In the case of the attempted redirection of a wire, everything looked right except for it was like a signature. Somebody who usually doesn't sign the wire form, there was a signature on it. It was just like, that seems odd. And then they just kind of looked at the rest of the email and was like, this is way off. Let's report it to the IT department. For the payroll redirect, that was one where we had an internal process where anytime that somebody wants payroll changed from one account to another, we have a verbal confirmation, so it's not all over email. And that's how that one was caught. The fake or the malware within attachments, that was caught by our antivirus. So that wasn't even users necessarily there. Some of the other ones where we have internal policies where we don't allow people to go to file shares. So Dropbox, Google Drive, those sorts of things. From the IT department, it is a giant headache for us to have to go download those things, scan them for viruses, and then deliver them to our staff. But it's worth it. It is worth it to go through that sort of work to protect our network and to protect the information of our customers that's on our network. So that's an internal policy that we've got. And we actually have equipment at the edge of our network that blocks access to, OneDrive and those sorts of things. It's a file filter. So that's some of the ways that we've got them. Does that answer your question? Maybe?
Yes, it did.
All right, sounds good. Any other thoughts, comments?
It's just hard to know because I ordered some residential mailboxes for a subdivision and of course used my email. Well, they must have had something on their end and they got my email. They got in. We don't know
bad guys
how, but it was a legitimate mailbox company,
Yeah.
Mailbox Works or.
Well, and that's a scary thing too, is that, we're conducting more and more business online. And a bad guy can, through various methods, can make sure that their result shows up higher in that Google search. And as soon as they're up there, they can compromise that site. We saw one yesterday that was a software manufacturer for bars and restaurants was where the link went to. And we do some business with bars and restaurants in town. There's no reason that we should have gotten an email with a link to, this is the software that they use. And one of our staff forwarded it to the IT department saying, this kind of looks funny. And we went on our off-network computers to do our investigation, and it went to that vendor's site, that vendor's legitimate site, and then redirected to the attacker's site. So the bad guys had gotten into that software company's website and was redirecting traffic to their bad site. So, that's one way they can do it. You also hear about breaches all the time, where this company or that company has lost usernames and passwords. And that may be how they got into accounts. I don't know. That's a good reason why you shouldn't reuse passwords. So the bad guys know that we're essentially creatures of habit. And so almost everything logging into the website is your email address. And since we're creatures of habit, we use the same password for everything. It's a really bad thing to do. Because as soon as one of those services gets breached, the bad guys then do what they call a credential stuffing attack, where they just start trying those credentials on every service that they can find. And if they get in, they'll see what they can do. So to help combat that, I would suggest that you look into a password manager or a password vault software. 1Password, LastPass, KeePass, all of those are fairly reputable ones. And I guess I should say, as I'm doing this, I'm speaking from my own experience on this stuff. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an insurance agent. The information that I'm sharing with you is just from my experience. It is not legal advice or anything like that. But from what I've seen, those three password managers are very reputable, and that will help you to have unique passwords for every site. The password manager that I use, when I set up a new account, I just say, generate a 20-character password, and I paste it in. I don't ever know it. I don't know how to get into my Facebook. If somebody asks me, where's my password manager? That's how, I guess, how simple they are to use. But you do want to protect that basket. So my password manager has a fairly long password and has a two-factor authentication on it. So it's, if you've only got one basket of eggs, you need to protect that basket. So, so that's kind of the business email compromise, how it works, how they end up getting money out of it. Any other thoughts or questions on that? So how do you protect yourself? First thing is awareness. Look for the red flags in your emails. Some of those might be an unexplained sense of urgency. We have seen internally, and this is one that I didn't list, but I've gotten an email supposedly from an employee saying, hey, I'm in a meeting, can you do me a favor? I reply back, of course I can do you a favor. Can you go get me some gift cards? Because we've got a promotion that we're running, and all of a sudden I'm like, what? It has to be done right now, I'm in a meeting, you can't call me, all of that sort of stuff. I'm automatically just kind of, nope, not helping you. ended up, it was one of those scams where they have you go buy the iTunes gift cards or the Google gift cards. So unexplained senses of urgency, any sort of last minute changes to your financial transactions, wiring instructions, any sort of changes to established communication patterns. Hey, I need you to start emailing me at this address, or hey, I want you to start texting me instead of emailing me. Any of that sort of stuff is a cause for just some pause, some hesitation, maybe follow up with a phone call saying, hey, is this really you? That said, as I mentioned before, the bad guys are upping their game. They're always on the con. So they know you've got two-factor authentication because they've tried to log into your account and it says it's going to do something. Or where should we send the authentication? So they're going to call you on your phone, or they'll text you and say, hey, this is whoever the service provider is. We'll use a bank since we're in a bank right now. Hey, this is Tyler from First Federal. I need to communicate some very sensitive information to you, but I need to verify that I'm talking to you. Can you share with me the 6-digit special identifier code that's on your app or that's just been texted to you? And you'll say it over the phone or send it in a text. Now the bad guys have the username, the password, and that time-based code to get into the account. So when you use multi-factor authentication that's code-based, never share that with anybody. Other things that you can do is promote awareness within your organization. That comes down to employee training. That comes down to talking about these things regularly. When something comes up in the news, have a conversation. Think about, could that happen to us? How would that happen? Who within the organization might this affect if that happened? Have those conversations about how you might protect yourselves. You can also practice responses. Here at the bank, we actually fish our staff. Internally, our IT team has a software that will allow us to send those fake emails. We also annually hire an outside firm so that it's not just the IT people that kind of know the inner workings, but the outside people who know exactly the tactics the bad guys are using. And we do those 3, 4 times a year against our staff. That helps to build that muscle memory within our staff, where what we're trying to do is not catch them doing something wrong. We're trying to catch them doing something right, which is we want them to report when something weird happens. And we've seen tremendous success by doing that. So I'd encourage that, fish your staff if that's something that will work for your business.
Tyler, I'd say just to comment on that, I'd say that's one of the most effective things we've done here at the bank, and most frustrating. But anyway, because when we first started,
And everybody gets caught.
when they first started this, we were not good at this. But the staff as a whole now is much, much better. It's a great learning tool to build that and build the awareness and educate staff by doing that.
And we follow up that email with, hey, this is what just happened. This is how you could have caught it. And at each step, so it's just like with the bad guys earlier, it is a multi-step process. I send an email, they have to click a link. They might have to put in credentials. They might have to download a file. So at each one of those steps, there's a spot where they can catch it. It's like, oh, I couldn't download that file because my antivirus program said it had a virus, but I didn't report it to the IT department? No, we need to retrain on that. Report this stuff to the IT department.
Your comment there about antivirus in this process, it just reminded me, Tyler, of the conversation we had probably a couple of years ago now. The banking industry is highly involved with all this, highly attacked all the time. And I was having a conversation with Tyler one time. So we got all these antiviruses and firewalls and all this. We invest a tremendous amount of money here at the bank to try to protect everybody with this. And you told me how many hits a day approximately we get here in Sheridan, Wyoming, in our bank. What was that? It was thousands a day.
I could look it up. I don't have it.
But it was thousands
Yeah.
of hits a day that our process and all of our equipment is catching here in this bank in Sheridan, Wyoming. So when Tyler says the bad guys, there's way more out there than I ever dreamt of. It's shocking.
And they're automating their stuff. So, they're very efficient at what they do too, which makes it scary. The other thing that I would mention is, with your staff, make sure that they know who to contact if that weird thing happens. A lot of small businesses, they don't have an IT staff, but do they have permission to call your IT vendor of choice? Or do they need to run it through a supervisor? Whatever your internal process is, make sure that your staff knows what that process is. Other ways, now moving on to protecting against business email compromise, validate suspicious emails with a phone call, very easy to do. We've already talked about two-factor authentication. We've talked about it with emails, but do it on all your accounts. It's just a good habit to have. Who knows when Facebook first started up, it was a place to exchange pictures and little comments. Now you can use Facebook to log into things. So when you first set up that account, maybe two-factor didn't make sense, but Facebook has evolved. You need to evolve with it. So now you need to have that two-factor on that other service. Otherwise, people may be able to get into these other accounts. So I would just encourage it on everything. You want to prohibit automatic forward of business emails to private addresses. So this is another tactic that the bad guys use. Once they've gotten into a mail account, I've already told you how that they will delete emails that they don't want you to see. They will also set up a rule to forward any messages to whatever account they want. And the reason for that is, from time to time, people change their passwords. Well, bad guy's gonna have a problem if that happens. But if the email keeps getting forwarded someplace else, they can still keep their hand in that account. And how many places do we have with account resets or password resets that go to our email accounts? That's why the bad guys do that. If you can set up in Office 365, it's possible, I know, because that's what we work with. But within other services, there's probably something similar. If you can prohibit the automatic forwarding of business emails, that's worth doing. Then, adding a little bit more awareness to for your staff. Create an external banner on messages. Here at the bank, we put it in the subject lines. I've seen it where they put it at the very top of the message you've read. Really what that does is that prevents the spoofed email. The email that's coming to me from Kate Bailey at efirstfedreal.com and instead of efirstfederal.com is going to be stamped with an external banner because it's not coming from our servers. And so when I look at that, I'm like, this looks weird. It's an internal address. I'm going to pause and just inspect this a little bit more. So that's another way to help protect your staff and help you protect your email. So those are the things like technical email way to do stuff. I'm going to turn it over to Kim, who's going to talk a little bit about some of these other things, positive pay, and then we can come back and talk about separation of duties and then.
With check fraud just refers to any type of fraud that relies on paper checks to steal money. And anymore, it used to be a pretty challenging thing to do. Well, again, the fraudsters are steps ahead of the rest of us, and the ability to digitally alter checks is come a long way, and it makes it really, really hard to spot a fraudulent check. Some of the ways they do it, check washing, meaning they actually will take a check, somehow get a check that is a legitimate business check, and chemically alter it in a way that they take out what they don't want and leave what they do want. And I've got some examples of local check fraud. Or they can counterfeit, just get the account information and create their own checks that look quite close to a legitimate business check. There is such thing as high security checks, which those, to be honest, they do make it a little bit harder to chemically alter because they have borders that are a little bit more complex. But in all honesty, a high security check is probably not worth the money in this day and age. There was a time, but anymore, honestly, it isn't. And then most of the checks that we've seen come through as fraud have been mobile deposited, meaning those checks never actually come through a teller line. Again, I've got some examples, but it's much harder to detect fraud if there is just a picture of a check that has never gone through a person's hands. Here at First Federal, we do offer mobile deposit. It's really, really handy. We have a deposit threshold of $1,000, not meaning that you can't deposit checks larger than that, but what it means is any item above $1,000 gets stopped and looked at by our staff, by our back office staff. They'll look at any check over $1,000 just to see, they're not gonna catch everything, but they can see if the endorsement is proper. They can see anything that might look off and send that check back rather than accepting it. So, here's some examples. Sorry about the bad image, but it's been scanned a few times. This is a real check. I have permission from a local business to use this. This is, if you notice, the business name, Mike's Electric, First Federal's logo is up there. The check number is both at the top right-hand corner and down here in the MICR line. There's a 0 in the MICR line. There's not there. That's legit. I've X'd out this, who it's paid to. The signature is from Cassandra Kaiser, who is a bookkeeper at Mike's Electric, and then it has the high security image on it. Down here, the check number, this is First Federal's routing number, and then this would be their account number. So that's a check that somebody in their organization, they wrote the check to somebody in their organization. Here you can see the check was endorsed by that individual, again, sorry, and it is a mobile deposit. He has totally done exactly what he should do. He's checked for mobile or remote deposit. So check goes through, it's a legitimate check. So we did have these go through, we did get the money back for this particular individual. And you think, well, okay, what do I do then? Well, the service that we have is called Positive Pay. And right now, just so you know, Positive Pay we do have for checks. So any business that writes a lot of checks, I truly, it's a free service. Takes a little bit of legwork on your part to set up, but once it's set up, it's super easy. We have it for checks, and then in the future, we'll have it for ACH as well, because a lot of people are going the ACH route. But how it helps block the non-authorized transactions before they clear your account. So that the instance or the example I gave you, they'd already cleared the account. So then you have the hassle of investigation. You have to close your account to open a new one. There's a real uneasy feeling once you've been a victim of fraud. You never know for sure how many other things the bad guy has. And you might have to have uncomfortable conversations with your employees. Did you really write this check? Or your vendors, did one of your staff get a hold of one of our checks and commit this fraud? So it's much easier to catch it before it clears your account. What Positive Pay is basically a digital check register. So you would set up the checks that you write online, and then any check that tries to come through to your account, if it's not on your Positive Pay roster, it won't clear. And our particular system matches on the check number, the payee, the amount, and the date issued. So if any combination or one of those items is off from what you have on your check register, and this check tries to come through, the system looks and says, no, this is not the right check. Sometimes you forget to add checks to your check register. Not a problem. At about 7:30 in the morning, an email is generated that says, hey Jane, you have a check trying to clear your Positive Pay account. Would you decision it for us? You hop on, you either say yes, accept it, I forgot to put that on there, or you say no, that truly is not my check. And it's a live system, it's real-time updates. So if for some reason you have an employee you've written a check to, they're at the bank, they're trying to cash their payroll check, you haven't added it to your check register, that's frustrating for them because they're like, well, this is payroll, I'd really like to cash this. We can get on the phone and let you know, hey, you have a check that's trying to clear that's not on your Positive Pay. Oh shoot, let me hop on and do that. Boom, you do it, they cash the check and they're on their way out.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Because I'm reverting into QuickBooks Online, and so I'm on auto feed and everything. So how is that going to work with that system? Will this work with parallel with the online system, QuickBooks?
Yes, it will. So, well, if I'm hearing you right, are you saying that basically you're just generating checks via QuickBooks?
I'm
Yes.
converting from
Mhm.
everything desktop to online.
Yes, you can do that, and then I'll show you an example. I'm not sure if, since we merged slideshows, if my link will take me where I need to, but I'll have
So,
Tyler,
I
I
hope
wanna
it
give
will.
me there. Huh?
I hope it will.
Yeah, me
so
too.
one other question.
Yes.
So how was the same check number used twice? I know they added a 0 on that one, but how did,
So this is this is the real check.
23,674?
And his endorsement, and then
Okay.
they added a 0 here because they must have seen on the real check that it was in the MICR line. When oftentimes you'll see check companies not put the leading 0 on the check number, but it's always in the MICR line. This is what the bank reads. So then he uses 29, 30, 37, and then,
So they're changing the check number at the top.
and the odds of this person being the same as the other fraudster, probably not. Probably there could be very different fraudsters or the same. They're probably not local. But the concerning thing for this business, bless their hearts, was they really thought, because the endorsement was exactly the same, they really thought that maybe one of their internal people, whether it be a vendor or staff, whoever that check was written to, that maybe they were the fraudsters, and that's hard. And as it turns out, that wasn't the case at all. In the end, we got all the money back, but it's just an uncomfortable thing to have happen, and it costs money and time and everything else. So, any other questions on the positive paycheck system? I would encourage any of you to, if you do mobile deposit, make sure you check for mobile deposit only. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to set you all up on positive pay.
If you have employees that do the mobile deposit, is it probably a good thing to like have them run it through a paper shredder or destroy it else, like, hey,
Definitely.
cool, use the mobile deposit, but when those checks are done, make it a point to.
Exactly, and void, whatever, but yeah,
You'll want to check the policy at the bank that they're depositing it on, because many banks will have a request, I would like to say requirement, but that you hang on to that check for a certain period of time,
Okay.
just to make sure it clears the account. And in case you ever have to present that actual check. And it's not long, I mean, it's a couple of weeks, isn't it?
I think I've seen 14 days.
14 days?
Cool.
So, store it securely until then, and then securely dispose of it.
I'm gonna have to talk to Carter about that.
yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I've got youth at home, well, a young adult, and I wasn't aware of mobile deposit for a while. And I'd see checks laying around, and I'm like, are you gonna put these in the bank? He's like, I already mobile deposited. I'm like, okay, we'll do something with them. But yeah, just take a picture, you've got your money in your account, and what you do with the check after that is, and
And
so.
it doesn't impact the person who the check was written to.
No.
It impacts who the check was written on.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know, Tyler, let's see if this will take me to where I need to. Okay, this is our demo site. Sorry, I'm just gonna get down here and drive a minute. And as you can see, most of you who are in business banking have seen this, but our positive pay is set up here. And once you add checks to it, of course, I would select an account, and I'll just show you the adding one by each check. There is the upload feature. The file is a CSV file, super easy to download from QuickBooks and then upload. You might have to manipulate it a little bit. And so we are going to, you can see I've got, I guess, just a check here that I've entered, check number 9, the payee, the dollar amount, and the status of that check. So you can see this every day as you go in. But if I want to add a check, it's super easy. I'm going to add an item. I'm going to add it to the one account I have and the check number and who it's to and the dollar amount. And again, these are the items that it keys on. So if a check comes through or tries to clear your account and all these do not match, then it'll get stopped via positive pay. And I'm gonna write $345 and it
Well,
was
this is like auto pay, I mean, it's like, when you set up auto pay, to write a check, is this the same system, auto pay?
oh, like ACH?
No, like when I go in and have you pay my bill, like a bill. pay.
Oh,
Is this bill pay, like bill pay?
It is, and do you use that now in our system? Yeah, it is the same exact platform, and so it looks, I'm sure, quite familiar. For any of you who've used our online banking system, you probably recognize that it's not super fancy. It doesn't come with a lot of bells and whistles, but it's very functional. And in my opinion, easy to navigate and understand. Oops. Maybe. So now you can see, I could add another one if I wanted, or if I go back to my checklist, that should be on there.
Click add.
Okay, well, you get the idea. If I had my check number straight, how it would work. And then that register you can update as often as you want to. And then again, if we receive, it's called a report, a GEM report. If we receive a notification that there's a check trying to clear your account, you'll get an email. And then if we haven't heard from you by 10 in the morning, we generally try to call you and just say, hey, will you decision this check? Then on your side, you'll see whether to pay or reject. And when we sign you up for positive pay, there is a checkbox that you, if we don't get a hold of you for some reason, or if you don't decision the check, that you decide everything is rejected or everything is accepted. Why everything would be accepted, I'm not sure, since the whole idea is to stop them. But in any case, if we couldn't get a hold of you, it'd reject.
So if it rejects, then you get in contact with the bank that it was deposited to have them stop it?
They would never get to deposit it because, you would have to, we would do return, it'd be like a return to maker. And so you would have to reach out to that bank. Yeah, or whoever, if you know who it was written to, and say, hey, I'll just reissue you a check, or hey, I've now added it to my register, try and run it through again.
That's the other link.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions on positive pay? And like I said, we will be launching ACH positive pay. It is right now available. The only thing is, you don't have the control to decision whether or not you want it to go through. So there's a little more development that needs to happen there before we send it out to you guys. I just wanted to, if you're not familiar with our First Federal's website, this is our business banking page, and then we have all our services here. And again, down at the bottom, the cash management, it's my name, we'll add Daniel's name to it soon. And this just has the other services that are available to you as businesses and a direct link to our positive pay page should you have further questions on that. Any questions? Comments? Okay.
How are we doing in billings? Any questions or comments?
I think we're all good here.
All right.
Very good.
Sorry, just one question. So the person that comes to, is trying to deposit that check, is not on the positive pay. Are they told that, that's the reason they got rejected, or they just think you don't have the money in the account because they got rejected? You know what I mean? It's just, they're like, oh, rejected, and then you look like you don't have money versus it wasn't on the register.
Well, I don't know how that conversation goes every time exactly.
Find out.
Yeah, I will find out and get back to you. I don't.
And speaking of that and getting back to everybody, I'm more than happy to share these slides with everybody. If there's notepads around, if you want to write your email address on that, I'll just email it out to you and whatnot. And if that works better for you, that's fine too. And Robin, the folks up in Billings, if you wouldn't mind, if they wanna have these slides, I'm more than happy to email those out to folks.
And then, sorry, just real
Yeah.
quick. So if, let's say you have a check that you've written and they're trying to deposit, or they deposit it at a Colorado bank, that person will be able to deposit that check. When it comes to us, through the feds, it comes to us and it's not on your positive pay, we just say return to maker at that point. And so that gives you, well, you decisioned it, you said no, and don't let this clear my account. And then at that point, you can have that conversation with who you issued it to, and let them know, hey, I'm sorry, or 99% of the time, you'll have it on your register, so you'll never hear from us. Checks will just go through just like normal. It's just that one or two A, the check is fraud, or B, you just forgot to add it to your register. So
that's why anytime you wanna cash a check, they wanna know that you have an account there at the bank, so, right.
Do you guys still allow somebody my paychecking? Do you guys cash it? If I don't have an account here, do you guys still do that?
We do. So if you guys write a payroll check to somebody and they don't have an account here, they can cash it against that.
Oh, but then you see if it's on the positive pay or not, and then go from there.
I think it throws in, if they come directly to here and it's written off of our account, I believe it throws some sort of an error at the teller line and it's a positive pay reject. Typically, we'll have a conversation with the back office and just, oh, whoops, I forgot to put that on there.
Right, or I keyed in the number wrong, or the
Right.
amount wrong. or those
Yeah,
sorts of things. Those sorts of things happen, we're human, So that's positive pay, a great way to prevent unauthorized payments. Other things that you can do internally, if you're doing ACH and wires, is do separation of duties. And really all that does is it just adds another check within the process of one person creates the payment within the system, and then another person is the one that double checks things and submits it. So it's just another set of eyes on the process, another person to say, hey, this seemed, or we don't usually do this, why are we doing it this way now? So that really helps with those sorts of things. And then the last thing is, here at First Federal, we do enforce multi-factor authentication on high-risk transactions. And the high-risk transaction in this case is the wire transaction. A lot of folks don't know, I didn't before I worked in the bank, that the protections that are available to me as a person aren't the same protections that businesses have. Businesses have much less protection. So when money doesn't clear my account, there are rules that say, me as a person, the bank has to take certain actions, make sure that funds are there or those sorts of things. But as a business, that's not required. So you want to be extra careful around things like wires. Because if you send money off to someplace and it's the wrong place and then it's gone, because that's how wires work, it's an instant transaction. Bad guys draw it out right away. If it's gone, there's nothing to recover. So that's why we put that extra step in multi-factor. And what this does is it prevents the bad guy who might have your login to your bank account, the username and password, from being able to wire money out. It doesn't prevent the authorized person who has multi-factor from accidentally putting in the wrong information or putting in purposely false information that was provided to them. But so these kind of work in tandem together to help protect your organization.
And it's a really good conversation starter. If you want to send out a wire transfer for a large sum of money that your business has never worked with before, one of your other coworkers might say, well, this is weird, why are we doing this? Oh, well, I received an email and they asked me to do it. It's a really good check.
Now, is that internal or external?
Which piece, the multi-factor?
Yes.
The multi-factor is something that the bank enforces on wires. So if you get your account set up to do wires by default, most accounts aren't. But if you choose to do wires, that's something that's automatically enabled on your account. Is in order to process through the overall process, you have to do the multi-factor, and setting it up the first time is really easy. Daniel's done it.
So on the separation of duties, that would be like the bookkeeper is paying
I think I
bills or
need to.
whatever, then that check would have to be seen by me or someone
But,
else
yeah,
to say, yes, pay
so-
this.
it would be the equivalent of requiring dual signature on a check.
Okay.
Only this is more electronic. So the bookkeeper would write the check and then put their signature on it in the check book.
Right.
And then they present it to whoever the other authorized party is, they sign it. In the digital world, what happens is the bookkeeper sets up the payment, and then it's the, whoever is authorized to release it to actually go through.
And when Tyler was talking about wires, it's online wires. You
Yes.
don't do online wires.
Well,
Correct.
we have ACH, and there are sometimes that most, we have what they call a factoring issue, a factor, they buy our invoices, and it is a, ACH, and sometimes when their ACH isn't available, it's wire, they have the choice of wire and ACH. So a lot of in the trucking, you do a lot of wire ACH transactions.
So of the two, wires are gonna be your higher risk transaction. ACH is a slower process with more checks built into the system. It's easier to recover money from ACH. So if you have the choice and if it's not required, I would protect my business with ACH when I can.
Right, okay, that's good to know.
Do you guys, work, like, since wire transfers are so, obviously risky, do you guys work with other banks? If I'm wire transferring someone regularly, do you work with other banks to verify that? Or, do you have like a verification process or anything like that on the back end?
Tanya might be able to speak to that. I am not familiar enough with the back end of that system to know.
Just based on conversations I've had with the county. Rephrase that to me again.
Just like if I'm sending, I'm First Fed and a customer and I'm sending it to a First Interstate Bank, right? A customer, and it's a wire transfer that's going every month. Do you work to verify that, hey, that, or is it just because of the consistency that it's verified, or do you guys work with any other banks to make sure that our primary clients and their banks are acknowledged by my account?
Not typically. What you will see though is that if I go to send money to you and somebody is spoofing it and it's going to, Jim Bob with your account number, if that doesn't match, the recipient bank will reject it. So there's a lot of things that are built into that, the name, the account number, the routing number, the address. We even go so far as to verify the address of the recipient and the address of the recipient bank. So if somebody says, hey, we want a key bank in Washington, that doesn't check out.
I think kind of the answer to your question is actually yes, except for that it's not we don't reach out to the other bank. All banks have these systems set up
Protocols.
on both sides, so we have protocols of wires and whatever's coming into us, and all the other banks do too.
Cool.
And that's, of course, there's thousands of banks out there, so that is happening to, kind of like Dan said, checking all the on both sides, the systems are set up to check that information. This is kind of a general term, but it's happening.
Makes sense. So, in summary, make sure all of your information is current. To like addresses if you move. Okay, cool.
But on the other side of that, the bad guys will use legitimate accounts. There are things like romance scams where you meet somebody online, and that somebody says, hey, I need to transfer some money, can I use your account, and those sorts of things. So the wire comes into a legit account and then goes out. So, there's the bad guys are always trying to think of ways around the protections that we deliberately put in place.
If they get the information right, it's going and it's gone.
Yep, that's what's scary about it.
And that scam that Tyler just talked about, we've been dealing with quite a few of those. We've had customers lose some pretty serious money with those.
So what do you do if you think you've been a victim of any of these sorts of scams? First, insurance, I showed you right at the beginning, there's a checkbox that says you've got a plan, execute your plan. If you don't have a plan, I'd suggest you put a plan together. Things that you might want to include in that plan is who gets notified when weird stuff happens. What do you do when weird stuff happens? Do you just turn off the computers and walk away from them? Do you unplug the network cable? Do you continue business as normal? And these are things that need to be communicated out to your staff. Who do you report the problems to? Is it internal? Is it through chain of command inside your organization? I would suggest some of these as potentials for places to report suspicious activity. Obviously, if it's somewhat benign or you're just early on, do internal, go to your IT provider, whether that's internal or external. But if it's funds transfers, you want to let your bank know. Sooner that the bank can get involved, the sooner we can start working on recovering those funds. If it's something that your insurance covers, your insurance will be a huge help. They've got resources that you're paying for with your premiums. So consider contacting your insurance if you've established that there is a fraud that's taking place. And the last thing on here, and it's certainly not least, is law enforcement. And law enforcement, I would say probably not local law enforcement. I love the Sheridan Police, but they're not geared for this sort of stuff. The people you want to talk to are the Secret Service or the FBI. Those two organizations talk to each other. I mean, we've talked about the statistics already from the IC3, but Secret Service, when I was growing up, and really until I worked in banking, I thought, well, the Secret Service are the people that protect the president, you know? That's not what they were designed for. They were designed to counteract counterfeiting in the 1900s and bank robberies, train robberies, those sorts of things. That's what the Secret Service does, and that is still the main focus of their charter. So I've sat through a number of webinars with the Secret Service, and they say that if they can get information as early as possible in the process, they can even recover money from wires. Because what the bad guys are doing is they move the money to a mule account, and then that mule account, they bounce it around to 3 or 4 different accounts. And if you can get it early enough, it's still in the system, and they can pull that money back. But if you get out more than a couple of days, chances are it's gone. So involving the Secret Service early is a really good idea if you've had some sort of fraud like this. We can certainly help you out with that. There's a field office down in Denver, and I can find more information for you. Again, if you give me emails, I'll be happy to give you stuff. The IC3 has a website. You can report fraud and those sorts of things through their website as well. How are we doing on time here? We're getting close. I can go through just kind of some nuts and bolts of ransomware if everybody's still good with that. I'm guessing maybe 10 minutes. It's kind of, as we saw in the numbers, the lesser threat. It's more of a general information sort of session than it is, things that we can do as a bank or those sorts of things. So I'm seeing some nods, so we'll go ahead and go through that. So what is ransomware and how does it work? We've all heard about it. The way it works is the bad guys get software on your computer. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. That software then does a number of things, or can do a number of things. So how do they get it onto your computer? They send you an email with an attachment. You open the attachment. It downloads or installs itself into your system and goes to work. Or maybe there's a vulnerability in your software or in your firewall that just gives them an open door. They just have the key. They know how to get around the exploit. So those are the two main ways that ransomware gets into systems. Once it's in there, the bad guys will let their software run. Typically, the old way of doing it was it automatically just started encrypting your files. And then it'd post a message saying, sorry, pay us and you can have your stuff back. And you might or you might not get your stuff back. The way they're doing it now, they're doubling down. They're creating more extortion options. So the first thing that they'll do is they'll copy your data to their servers. Then they'll delete your backups because they know that we've gotten smart and we're doing backups, but we're not smart enough to disconnect them from our computers, which basically means that the hard drive is still there to be encrypted. Then they'll encrypt your data. So the way the extortion works is they say, your data's encrypted, pay us. And you go to your backup and you're like, oh crap, my backup's not working. So you pay them. And then they say, we've got people who have money and they're willing to pay. oh, by the way, did you know that I still have a copy of that data and it's got sensitive customer information? And it would certainly be a shame if that got leaked all over the dark web. Pay me. And if you pay them, they'll then say, God, you know, we told you we wouldn't leak it on the dark web, but we know exactly who this information's about. We can contact them directly. Pay me. Or we've been in your email and we've seen all those nasty things that you're doing, and we're gonna let your spouse know. Pay me. And whatever they think of, and all of them have been done. You know, they're trying to get the money out of you. That's how the ransomware network works. Another way, and this isn't ransomware, but this is another way that they extract ransoms, is they will say, you have an online commerce site, and I have a system that can overwhelm your online commerce site. If you don't want me to unleash it on your business, pay me. And that's what they call a denial of service attack or a DDoS attack. So those are all the different ways, probably not an exhaustive list, but there are different ways that the bad guys try and extort ransoms from people. So how do you best protect against the file encrypting type of ransomware? Your best ways are patching the ways they get in. You know, make sure that your computers are patched, your printers are patched, your routers are patched. Have endpoint protection on your computers, which would be, you know, antivirus, or in the more advanced terms, they call it EDR, which is endpoint detection and response. It's kind of like antivirus on steroids. Have secure configurations. A lot of folks, when they get that modem or that router from wherever they buy them, they just put them into use, set up their Wi-Fi, and they're set to go. Well, most of those have a default password on them. And you can search the web and find out what the default password is to your Linksys router at home, and the bad guys can do that too. So change your default passwords on everything. These are some good ways to help prevent. Other things that you can do, have good backups. Always a good thing, that'll help you with your recovery. The backups, you need to unplug periodically. I would have 2-3 hard drives in rotation. Plug one in on Monday, let it run the backup overnight, plug a different one in on Tuesday. Now the bad guys are kind of smart about this. They may lurk in the background and encrypt every hard drive that's offline. So you may want to keep something offline for a month. You know, have a few backups that you can restore from. You also need to make sure that you test your restores. Back in the old days of tape backups, this was the biggest bugaboo because tapes were not reliable media. They were fast though. We do our backups, and then we need to restore something, and the tape wouldn't work. Your backups. Make sure that you can restore that critical data. It may just be a file or two here or there, but at least you've tested it. The other things is to have and test your business continuity plan. This is more about resilience than it is recovery. How long can you operate without your computers? And what would you do to operate without your computers? That's your business continuity plan. What things do you use? You log on paper? Do you bring in your personal laptop from home and try and do stuff that way? But you need to figure out what your plan is because it may happen. So have and test that business continuity plan. Again, insurance is asking you to have a business continuity plan to begin with. So it's good to have that. Get professional help. IT professionals, we've got several in town that can help you out with ransomware. There are actually websites out there that have some of the less sophisticated ransomware folks use the same password to encrypt everything. So there are websites out there that show that where you can download that password. You may be able to, if you can identify the type of ransomware that they're using, may be able to unencrypt stuff yourself.
What do you think about VPNs versus just regular? Is that better?
What do you mean by just regular?
Well, you know, doing a VPN instead of having that protection for VPN security than just
So are you referring to like you roll into Starbucks, you log onto the Wi-Fi and do whatever you're going to do at home?
Yeah.
So what a VPN is going to do for you on your home network is it's going to keep the other devices on your network from knowing what you're doing. It can also mask where your computer is coming from. A lot of people will use a VPN so that they can watch that Netflix show that's only available in England. So that's their VPN exit node as they go through England so that they can watch that Netflix show. But I think the best use of it for a business case is if you're VPNing into your network to work from home. And this has been a huge thing in COVID. A lot of businesses were scrambling. And so what they did was they opened a port in their firewall that opened up to a service in Windows called Remote Desktop. Well, that port in that firewall is open to the whole world. So bad guys then remote desktop in and get access to the network. I fully anticipate that we're going to see another big increase in the numbers reported in 2021.
And see, that's
So-
nice. Everything in transportation is electronic, and everything is mobile, and everywhere you go, you use some type of electronic.
So some of it's going to depend on your use case. What I would generally say is a VPN is going to provide you more control and more protection than just going over the Wi-Fi. Your hotspotting off of your phone is going to provide you more protection than going off of the Wi-Fi at Starbucks or in an airport. So it's kind of a hierarchy of what's going to be the best for you. And if you're hotspotting or if you're going off of Wi-Fi in a public space, still probably wouldn't be a bad idea to run that VPN. Just to
We're way
protect.
more concerned about since you brought that up, about people, because everybody's remote.
Yeah.
And anything and everything, they're shipping, we have no idea half the time when we're talking, other than hearing the chickens in the background, or the dogs or the cat, that they're working from home. So that, brings up a whole big risk aspect now.
But, and a lot of the services that you're probably connecting to aren't at your office though. They're web-based services, so cloud is a big thing for that. And one would hope that your cloud provider has pretty robust security, but that's a hope. So that's where part of your risk management as an organization, we call it internally third party or vendor management. Any vendor that we do business with, we want to find out what type of information they've got, how they're securing it, how they're securing logons, all of those things before we do business with it, because it's a risk to us. And we, like insurance, are in the business of mitigating risk.
I'm not familiar with the term patch system
Patch system?
on their previous slide.
Yeah, so when I talk about patching systems, it's applying the security patches to, like Windows on the second Tuesday of every month, they release all of the latest security patches for Windows.
Okay.
Mac does it on a different cadence. We don't do a whole lot with Mac, so I don't know what that regularity is. But you want to when I say patch systems, I mean patch your systems, like patch your computers. And by patches, I just mean the security updates. Okay. Make sure that you've applied those.
Okay.
Tyler, I know that your computer, will typically do those automatically for you kind of in the background. I'm assuming it's on and it's connected to things like that. Your router and your printer, I imagine, don't.
They do not.
The router.
Some of the newer routers do. The older routers are less likely.
And the biggest exploit for data breaches are the routers. Like
Yep.
they're neglected, right? So.
And they're sitting at the edge of the network in the wild west of the internet. So that of the things that need to be patched, that's one of the highest up there.
Sure.
Because it's the most exposed. It's in the dark alley.
When you say newer versus older, I mean, what rough time frame are you looking at there?
I would say within the last 2 or 3 years, they've started to build in auto updates.
Oh, cool.
I know before that though, you had to pay attention. You could sign up sometimes for email notices when Linksys had their update or Netgear or whoever you use. But yeah, and then the last thing that I would say here on recovery from ransomware is restore your backups if you can. If you can't, and the restore flip fails, you need to know what you're going to do. And this is where it just turns my guts, because you may have to pay some people if the data is critical enough. And that gets even more complicated by the fact that under the law, the US law doesn't generally prohibit you from paying somebody to get your stuff back or that sort of stuff. But a lot of these ransomware organizations are affiliated with terrorist organizations, which means that if you're paying them, you may be in violation of the law by helping to finance terrorism. So when you're thinking about whether or not you want to pay ransom, I would say let's move up this list a little bit higher and make sure that we don't get in a position where we have to pay that ransom, because it could get very ugly.
What happened with Campbell County Hospital?
So Campbell County Hospital got hit with ransomware, and I don't know if they paid or not. I don't know if they restored. The last time I heard, which I haven't watched it or checked into it in the last probably 6 months or more, it was still one of those ongoing investigation type issues, and they weren't releasing a whole lot of data.
They didn't even say how it happened.
Yeah, and that piece I don't know either. If I had to guess, it was through email. That somebody downloaded something that was in a link, or that was actually in an email, and it got in that way. That would be my gut, because most attacks start with email. So, the last slide I've got are just kind of some other scams to be aware of. I mean, we already talked about the romance scam. That's kind of the end of some of these other scams. That's how the bad guys get the money moving around and get it out of the system. Non-payment, non-delivery scams, the way those work is you buy something online, you give them the money, they never deliver it, so they run off with your money. Or on the other side, you sell something online, you ship it, they never send you the money. So be aware of those. Charity and disaster fraud, this is, I can also say current events fraud. Anytime there's something going on, there's gonna be emails going out saying, please help these poor people, or, you know, it's just awful. Be aware of the people or the places that you're donating money to. The bad guys capitalize on current events. And then the advanced fee scams, that's more the, you pay us X number of dollars and we're gonna guarantee you a stream of income based on this. It's a lot of the stuff that we used to see in the newspapers of, you know, pay for this list of customers or pay for this special training or whatever, and we'll guarantee you an income. That's an advanced fee scam. So be aware of some of those. And just to kind of wrap up, taking this to that next level, we've talked about just briefly vendor management and third-party management. It's scary, but how much do we depend on each other in this interconnected society? And what happens to one of our vendors or one of our customers, how that might affect us. Also good things to build into your response plans. So, thank you guys, and I'm happy to entertain any questions, but other than that, you're free to.
I'll leave your email.
Yep, and if
Yeah, leave your email,
If you've
I've
got
got a
emails.
notepad.